I am going to kick us off. I am riding solo today. I had a client situation come up where my colleague is going to be focused on that, and we're going to divide and conquer. So with that, please do give me some grace when I'm trying to navigate the PowerPoint as well as answering questions and any feedback that anybody might have throughout the discussion. I just dropped a survey link inside the chat. This survey link will take you to kind of the post-survey or post-presentation feedback, as well as if you want to request any additional content or any additional support from Concurrency, happy to provide that as well. There's a checkbox in there that allows you to request this PowerPoint deck. So as far as that question, I'll go ahead and answer that one first. This PowerPoint will be available to those that are interested in it. Just go ahead and check that box and we'll have it sent your way. Awesome. I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Gonna walk through. Can I get a reaction or a thumbs up? Awesome. Cool. Perfect. All right, everyone. This is a super interesting topic, very relevant in today's world in that I want to say about 2 years ago, Broadcom made the announcement that they were going to be acquiring VMware. So this acquisition kind of sent ripples throughout the organization, throughout the industry, and we're starting to see the renewals starting to pile in, right? And in some organizations, the renewals are as expected. We're looking at the same increase or expectation of contract and license renewals. In other cases, it's been a really large shocker. In our case, we wanted to bring this to to various organizations to just understand what it is that we're seeing in the market. Ultimately, we tend to be responsible as IT leaders or technology leaders to make the final decision on, cloud migration strategies. Are we generally cost effective? Are we aligning to the overall business objectives and strategies? And how does this play into the strategic decisions that I have to make for my company's IT infrastructure? Primarily stability, security of our systems, and how we provide for our business counterparts. And so VMware has been around for quite a bit of time. And all of the cloud providers have, in some flavor or other, been able to work with VMware to provide a VMware certified solution for their service, for their cloud service. And so when we talk about this topic, we're going to be talking about a combination of, why would we move to Azure VMware services or VMware solution, or why would we stay put even? I'm of the perspective that, there are some cases, niche kind of edge cases, where it might make sense to potentially run a hybrid cloud. Right? In those situations, what is our cloud strategy? That's going to be something that I continue to hit back on is what is the strategy? Because do nothing is a strategy. Do something minor or do something grand can also be a strategy. But if we are sitting here and waffling between, reacting to the situation, then we haven't really put forward a plan or a strategy. And so as we look at why customers move into VMware workloads in the cloud, we are looking at predominantly right now licensing concerns. We have seen a combination of clients coming to us saying, I need to get exit out of this data center within X amount of period of time because I'm either leasing it and my lease is up, or the hardware costs are surmounting and we need to just take it out. From a CapEx, OpEx model, we don't want to continue to depreciate assets or have this capital expenditure coming up for a lifecycle hardware refresh. Instead, we'd rather move to an OpEx model. And then there's an additional piece of that where the modernization pace and speed continues to be outpaced in the cloud. So notice I said the pace in the cloud continues to be faster, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do the same thing on-prem. All that means is you need to have the same skill sets, same technologies, same rapid pace of movement on-prem as you see in Azure, AWS, GCP, right? And that becomes kind of that economy of scale where organizations can't adapt and move as fast. We don't have the funds to be able to mess around in R&D and researching new technologies and implementing, etc. And so we rely on kind of tried and true brands to bring, the best forward, leading edge technology. And we as technology leaders then assess whether or not that is best for the progression and the modernization of our organizations. As far as licensing concerns go, I have heard and seen Broadcom renewals that have come in at 5, the typical 3 to 10% increases, and we have seen them go 2x, 3x. There was one situation where there was a 5x bill renewal for Broadcom, and so this is a real life risk, if you would, that needs to either be mitigated, transferred, accepted. And so more or less, our organizations today are sitting with a large subset of a VMware or a hypervisor-based solution on-prem. So we're talking about hyperconverged technologies. We have a predominantly good skill set in VMware, and we have that VMware license that kind of usually drags us down to a certain degree. The other pieces of it that I've identified or kind of seen is a lot of us are still stuck on the data center mentality, right? We're still operating, running cables. We're still upgrading and refreshing UPSs and everything that comes with, the generators, etc. Everything that comes with running a data center. Some of us have leased a data center, and we feel like we've outsourced some of that responsibility to someone else. But more or less, it's still a piece that comes up frequently. Hey, why did we have this outage? Why did we have this incident? Oh, something happened, server overheated, we need to expand this rack, etc. And we are stuck with, we have this skill set. We don't want to pivot into cloud because this skill set does not necessarily translate fully. Enter AVS, right? So the Azure VMware Solution gives us an opportunity to continue to use that existing skill set because the look and feel, more or less, is very similar or exactly the same. When we come into an AVS solution on Azure Cloud, it is, for all intents and purposes, it is vSphere, right? Like we are working in that same environment, is just hosted in Azure. We get price protection, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides where we talk about some of the incentives that Azure is running right now. We have the ability to scale rapidly. We don't have to wait for a hardware refresh. We don't need to wait for ordering net new hardware so that we can rack a server, rack a switch, and move forward. And we get the ability to use all of the Azure toolset that Azure brings to bear, to include the storage, which is a big component to benefits that we get from Azure and VMware kind of partnering together. So we get that resiliency, that scale, the agility. And we have the predictability, in my opinion, more important than that, the predictability of the licensing costs, with some incentives coming up to talk about that. So you'll hear me talk to the word migrate to modernize, or Azure migrate and modernize. That is a Microsoft term. It is a Microsoft incentive or solution. But I think what's most important, so that we can key in on that, is Microsoft will incentivize these types of moves. And when I say incentivize, us as a Microsoft partner are able to bring certain investments from Microsoft to bear when it comes to migrating these solutions for you. In the case of AVS, I hate to say it's as simple as 4 steps because it's never as simple as 4 steps, but it's identifying that we have a data center situation. We want to move to Azure VMware Solution. We're able to lock in pricing and discounts so that we know either 1 year, 3 years out, potentially even 5 years, we have a cost basis based off of the consumption that we currently use on-prem. You can also factor in any additional growth that you want to. With native Azure services, once you move into cloud, you're able to then take advantage of some of those modernizations for your either applications or monitoring, etc. Anything that comes with Azure, you're able to then add that, kind of compile that onto your AVS solution. And so in this scenario, actually, we have a scenario that'll come up that we'll talk about a certain client where they were able to move to Azure to get rid of some tech debt. After they got rid of that tech debt, their performance of their application improved. It wasn't necessarily that Azure VMware or VMware was the solution of choice. It was that the fact of the matter was that they were on VMware. They were hampered by their on-premises speed of modernization. By moving into the cloud, they were able to accelerate that. They could have done the same exact thing on an Azure native based solution, but they chose to stick with that tried and true VMware background because they had a skill set in that space. And so they didn't want to have to spend some time relearning or understanding the nuances of the Azure console. They wanted to just say, hey, let's move in there so that we can take advantage of the good. We'll keep the other risks, we'll mitigate those or we'll avoid those for the time being. And it worked out for them. I want to pause here for a moment and maybe talk about why AVS, why not Azure Native Services? As far as AVS goes, we are able to move very rapidly to Azure. So from a existing VMware environment, what it equates to is that we can do a vMotion into Azure. That oversimplifies things a little bit. You still need to make sure that you have an Azure landing zone, that it meets the cloud adoption framework to the best of your ability, and then we have some hard and fast networking considerations. But more or less, we identify the hosts that need to move into Azure. We vMotion into Azure to a certain degree. We can keep the same IPs. We could keep certain aspects depending on what your need as an organization is. And then from there, we can start tacking on additional Azure solutions that we may want to expand our VMware capability, or we can just keep it as is. And then we say, okay, we achieve this so that we can exit the data center. And that's almost always the biggest driver. It's either that or cost, right? So it's either licensing cost or data center exit that is pushing VMware users into a cloud environment. This is kind of where you get to choose the choose your own adventure type books that we used to read back in the day. Might be dating myself here. And we had the opportunity to either stay in VMware, or we can say that this is a stepping stone. I know that I just need to get into the cloud so I can exit this data center. We're going to focus on that with our resources. After that, we have a certain plan. Going back to cloud strategy, is our cloud strategy to be VMware focused, or is it going to be kind of this run a hybrid environment in Azure, run a hybrid environment? Maybe there's another data center that's going to be retained, or so there's the option where it's a stepping stone and we are moving into VMware to exit the data center and start skilling up in Azure. And then we're going to slowly shift some of those VMware solutions into native, either Azure VMs, could look at Kubernetes clusters and kind of move into the containerization space as well. Or there's the wholesale, one of the most common engagements that we do at Concurrency, which is, hey, I currently have a VMware solution. We don't care for VMware, we're out of it, let's go. And we can work through going from VMware to just a Azure native solution such as VMware or containerization. If you want to get really fancy, you can even look at certain applications being modernized for web application services and some SaaS, PaaS-based solutions, so you're not owning the burden of the entire technology stack. And so happy to continue a discussion on that. There's a lot of opinions I will have on that, as well as my team regarding, what makes sense for you as an organization, and it's never cookie cutter. So any of these, if you go speak to a vendor and they tell you this is the way, you probably should kind of back out and back away slowly, like the Homer Simpson meme, because you don't want to put yourself in just this kind of specific corner where you limit your options. So we can continue to expand on that at a later time if anybody has any additional questions. When you move to Azure VMware Solution, you have, like I mentioned, this VMware super fast migration opportunity where we don't have to refactor. We're able to modify some applications as needed, but for lack of going into the technicals, it is a vMotion. It is a point and click type of migration, as long as you have the right prerequisites set up. It allows us to maintain that familiarity of the VMware technology. So we're using the same tech stack. We know the look and feel of vSphere, right? The added benefit is that you don't have to bring your licenses with you. So that's the big kicker, right? When you purchase a VMware server or host in AVS, there is a 3 host minimum, and then you can scale up those hosts to a certain point, or you can add additional hosts. Each one of those hosts comes with their own license. And so when you are exiting a discussion with Broadcom, you're able to say, do I renew these, or do I bring my own, just net new, just pay for what I need to use within Azure? The other piece of it, if you are stuck in the middle of your current contract, so maybe your situation is, I don't have an impending contract, I either already renewed or I have X amount of years left in my contract, there is it's not the Azure hybrid use benefit, but it's the equivalent of that, which would be you can bring your own license. There is a cost adjustment that is made, and so you don't have to delay your move into AVS if that is what your strategy entails. So you're able to continue using that VMware solution. Licensing is either a problem and you can resolve it, or licensing is no longer a problem because you're able to bring your license, and then as that license expires, you just move into the Azure pricing model. Or if you want to continue renewing your license directly with Broadcom, you can do that as well and continue to use that hybrid use benefit. And the best part of it is that you have the capacity of Azure to expand and contract within your cloud environment. Once you're in there, you're able to have consolidated billing. So when we talk about FinOps from a cloud financial operations perspective, an optimization perspective, we are able to look back and say, this cost center accounts for X amount of our cloud spend. And from a CIO persona perspective, it isn't, well, this is what my VMware environment looks like, and this is what my cloud environment looks like. We're able to bring that all under one bubble, and we're able to cost optimize and cost allocate and do chargeback, showback as a holistic IT infrastructure base versus the tried and true incident response situation where we say, oh, this server, that one's on-prem. So then focus on this workflow as opposed to, oh, this one's on Azure. That means this is how we respond to it. Kind of just centralizing that situation for you. JP, I can get you that answer, but I'm not going to be able to do that right in the middle of this. There is 3 different host types within AVS, and the they're pretty expansive, but there is a minimum. To your point, there is a minimum for those for the three minimum hosts that you need to have for AVS, and so have to take a look at that. But we'll get back to you. Thank you for that question. Kind of alluded to this already. I'm not gonna kind of drain this too much, but the principle is we want to be able to provide symmetry between the VMware stack and the AVS solution. So AVS provides you with this private cloud that contains the vSphere clusters. It's built on dedicated Azure bare metal infrastructure. Ironically, actually, no, they've changed it. I was going to say, ironically, it is a Hyper-V environment for Azure. So it's Hyper-V running, but they've actually moved to a VMware certified hardware for the AVS solutions. And this is why they're able to bring some of these cost incentives at scale because they've made an investment with VMware. But there was, at some point, there was an irony that it was running on Microsoft hardware. And then all provision private clouds, they all have their vCenter, their vSAN, vSphere, and SXT. And so you can migrate workloads from on-prem to new virtual machines on Azure, and it's connected via either an express route or a VPN. We say express route, but it's actually a proprietary express route that's made for AVS, Azure VMware Solution. So it's a express route global reach connection. And so if you have an existing express route, we can talk about options, but there's still probably a additional resource that would need to be deployed to make that connection. So the way that it works is that Azure VMware, the AVS environment is a standalone landing zone within your Azure, and you need to connect it to your hub and spoke of the remainder of your Azure environment. So there's peering that's involved. There's just network connectivity that's required to make sure that it can speak to either back to your on-prem for your offices or to other applications within Azure. So those are the small nuances that I had mentioned earlier just to consider during a migration. So as we move into the environment, what we do is we reduce the amount of overhead on our organization because we only need to focus on the management, application, operating system plane. The Azure VMware Solution landing zone would be managed by both our kind of a shared responsibility of ourselves as well as Azure from the backend hardware. And so when you look at the left-hand side, those are those data center costs predominantly. Those are data center costs that we incur as well as the cost of the resources to continue to be trained up on these specific aspects of IT. And then collectively, as we do that and move into Azure, we're able to achieve a more holistic picture of our performance and our security within our environment. When we talk about surface area, when we talk about, having different skill sets, different locations, different platforms, it increases our risk liability of having to bolster each of those environments, having to maintain security, maintain best practices in all of those areas. And so there is a benefit in consolidating under a certain roof. And I'm not going to say that it has to be Azure, right? I'm saying from a practical perspective as a technology leader, if you have 7 different technologies and tool sets that you're working with, it becomes increasingly harder for you to manage at scale. And so as you look at what is your partner, what is your technology tool of choice, how do we look at third-party risk management? How do we look at vendor lock-in? Those are all factors that are super important as a organization to identify and have a plan for. That being said, the 3 top cloud providers are great providers, and they have a lot of backing and support built in to their infrastructure. And so I feel confident as an IT leader pointing at those and saying any one of them I'm comfortable with. Some of their some of their VMware solutions are not as robust or mature as some of the others. So that is one thing to consider if you're in a VMware state. When you move into the Azure footprint, you're able to leverage anything that's on the Azure backbone, right? So our Azure Elastic SAN has been a huge win for one of our clients, where they're able to host their application and expand for their customers in their SaaS solution using a tool like Azure Elastic SAN, and continue to add disks to different hosts as needed. Pure storage, something that we're very familiar with, generally is still available, right? So there's the Azure Marketplace, and we're able to bring in partner solutions that we have continued to be familiar with. We have like Zerto still on there. Any of your backup solutions are available on Azure as well. And so this is kind of where it starts clicking, right? Is that I'm not just limited to my VMware solution base now on-prem or on Azure. I can now start to bring in some of those tool sets that have been developed for a more progressive technology stack. I kind of mentioned briefly disaster recovery options. One of the coolest things that I've seen is certain clients that have taken advantage of failing over into AVS and then saying, well, now we're in the cloud. Or they've also maintained a data center on-prem and had a hybrid model where they continue to run their main application out of their on-premises data center, but they knew they had the peace of mind that at any moment they could fail over into AVS. So, and it was still going to be the same look and feel, right? The other piece that we've seen is, hey, we're going to have an AVS solution, and it's very simple to replicate the exact same AVS solution and move it into another landing zone and have that network connectivity so that we have AVS parity within Azure. And then the final piece would be if you had an Azure VMware Solution situation where you said, we're going to work towards this Azure native piece. We're going to have these VMs built in the future. Right now, we just need AVS. They've either built it and kind of built it with the business case that it is an additional DR solution, or they eventually make it their main solution and then have AVS as their backup, or they kind of gradually move into a situation where they say AVS is our current main deployment method. If we need to fail over, we're going to fail over these specific applications, and we've already done the refactoring for these applications to move them into or hosted them onto an Azure native footprint. I'm seeing some comments. Going to take a quick second to read them real quick. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to try to tackle this when I get to an upcoming pricing / incentive slide. So if I don't hit on that, please do reach out, because I don't want to leave you empty-handed there. All right, secure and defend your apps and data. So Microsoft's approach, especially in the last year or two, especially after CrowdStrike happened, is a focused approach on security in multiple dimensions. There's a list of key technologies here within the Azure stack that can be leveraged as you move into the VMware estate in Azure. So you've got your identity through Entra ID. This is by far probably the most important, in my opinion, as far as lateral and horizontal movement that can be done in your Azure footprint. You know, if we can limit and lock that down, have some privileged access, identity management concepts, then we really limit that attack vector for our organizations. Then, of course, there's the tried and true. Like there's data protection that we always do. So when we talk about DevSecOps or DevOps in general, security is baked into everything we do, whether we call it security or not. We as IT practitioners should be considering this as part of our methodology. And so moving into AVS allows us to take advantage of a various number of security-based solutions that help bolster our environment. So what does it look like for AVS, right? And so right now, VMware, you can conduct a rapid VMware migration. I kind of mentioned the vSphere, not the vSphere, sorry, the vMotion move. As of right now, from a price protection perspective, Microsoft has increased the discounts that they are offering on reserved instances of 1, 3, or 5 years for VMware estates. So if you were to move into Azure, this was ending in December of 2024, and now it has been extended to June 25th, 2025. And so you have the ability to move into AVS if you want to commit to pricing for 1, 3, or 5 before June 2025. You'll be able to kind of lock in that additional 20%. It's 20% for 1-year RIs, and I think it actually goes up. So that's an additional 20% off the 1-year RI. I think the last time I looked at the 1-year RI, it was 28 to 34%. So you have the potential of going kind of north of that. So that's a perfect situation where, hey, I need to move out of a data center. I need to get into AVS, for example, but I don't want to be stuck in AVS. I don't want to have that situation where we make a big project, we do something, and then we never follow through on the completion of our solution or our strategy. And so you can artificially give yourself a 1-year timeline and say, hey, at 1 year, we're going to start paying full price for AVS. So we need to have a plan, put it in place and continue moving it forward. Or there's flexibility within everybody's strategy. Here's our outlook for 3 years. This is what we're going to do. In those 3 years, 5 years, we're going to refactor our application. We still need to upskill some of our team on Azure Cloud or some, infrastructure as code concepts. So we need to work on that and give ourselves that time before we just jump wholesale into a new environment for us. So there's that aspect right now that Microsoft is providing as an incentive. The Azure Hybrid Use Benefit is what I had mentioned originally, the ability to bring your existing licenses to your AVS solution. And then at the same time, when you move into Azure, Microsoft actually provides an additional X amount of years of security updates, specifically for Windows Server 2012, R2, and the SQL servers listed below. You get more or less, I think it's, I want to say it's October 2025 is what they're currently set for sunset. And so you're looking at another additional potentially year of that support for that specific Windows server. I'm not a proponent of waiting until the last minute, so I would public service announcement here to say, if you're operating on something that's going end of life, you should probably start looking at how do we gradually bring our operations up to par. The Azure Migrate and Modernize Assistance Program. I had alluded to this earlier on in the conversation, where Azure, only when partnering with a Microsoft partner, do you unlock the achievement of being able to tap into AMM funding. So the AMM funding program, depending on the size of your Azure consumption, allows us to bring anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 in additional support to help with the professional services fees or the migration costs of your environment. That specific funding program can also be paired with other funding programs that are going on at the time. So Microsoft's always adjusting, tweaking. Their year starts in June, or in July. So there's always kind of these, you'll see that a lot of these incentives end in June 2025 because that's kind of their fiscal year. There's an additional pot of money that's been set aside for AVS-based migrations this year, where I'm not sure if it's a first come first serve type thing. As once it's depleted, it's kind of gone. But it's definitely an area where when you see Microsoft pushing on certain areas, it's better to try to tap into those additional pools of funds and being told no than to just assume that you're stuck doing this migration the old-fashioned way. And so all that to say, when it comes to your cloud strategy, there really is no cookie cutter way of doing this. There are these incentives that need to be taken into consideration. But when it comes to how long are we going to be in AVS, how fast do we need to get in there? What does our cloud strategy look like from a business perspective? Like, how does this support our business strategy? That's where you start to get into the conversation of, at one end, it's, hey, we're full wholesale going into Azure, and that means that we need to discuss a large transformational cost change and how we do business. We need to bring Microsoft account executives into the call and start talking about other enterprise type agreements. Or there's then there's a smaller aspect of we are moving into the cloud for the first time ever. We need someone to kind of help guide us, give us that perspective throughout this, give us the kind of the guardrails to help us stay on path. There are contract clauses or so you will have the three main hosts the minimum hosts that you're required to have. Beyond that, you can you pay for the host. You don't pay for the usage on the host. I'll have to get clarification on that for you. But that's where the scalability, the size of that host, only on the AVS solution does matter. And so when we talk about which host do we need, can we grow into those in the future to a certain degree, because you don't want to have to create a situation where you turn off a host and restart. And then there is no contract requirement except for 30 days. So if you spin up a host, you can turn it off tomorrow, but you'll still pay the 30-day cost of that host. Whereas if you go into these reserved instance options, you can still turn off the host after a month. If you paid for a 1-year reserved instance, for example, you commit for 1 year, you're going to pay for the 1-year cost. You can turn off your device whenever you want. And so that brings into consideration the, what is my, going back to cloud strategy, or what is my application strategy, is, do I need this? We had a situation where a client's customer base, they signed 5-year contracts. The client did not want to do a 5-year RI just because they had a 5-year contract, but they felt a little bit more comfortable that because they had a 5-year paper, they could reserve it for 3 years. And that was their risk appetite on that. They knew that they were going to get a check from their customer for a certain amount of time, and they're able to kind of manage that. And so sounds like there might be kind of those nuances that we might want to unpack when it comes to your specific use case. Cool. I'm going to switch gears for just a little bit to talk about the current solution assessments that Microsoft has come out with. And so predominantly in the past, what us as a Microsoft partner have used is we've used some sort of migration tool, assessment tool like Azure Migrate, Dr. Migrate, Mover, and we have done the assessment ourselves. So we'll come in, we'll look at your current situation and make an assessment, make a project, like a Azure migration plan for you. About a year and a half ago, Microsoft took that over from the Microsoft partners. And so they've centralized their solution assessments team. And what that has done has allowed Microsoft to kind of have consistency on what is given to each of their customers. And as you're moving into the cloud, they're able to say, here's your snapshot, right? That is free to you as a client, potential client. The last month or so, Microsoft has come to us and said, hey, we want to continue, we want to start partnering with you as a partner. And so the changes that are happening is that Microsoft will still provide individuals to help kind of install Dr. Migrate, kind of get it rolling and start the assessment process. But they've asked that a partner come in to be engaged in your day-to-day, understanding your situation, your migration plan, your strategy, so that we can help formulate more from beyond the technical level. So there's the technical aspect of you have 300 servers. They need to be moved to Azure. But then as a partner, we're able to understand what is the sequencing of these servers? What's causing you to move into Azure, and why does this matter, so that we can help with your specific use case. And so as that has grown and that partnership has grown, it looks something to the effect of a combination of Microsoft and us as a Microsoft partner working with you to provide a business case for your migration. The last month and a half, Microsoft has come out with their Azure, they're calling it AVS Express. So AVS Express is now their flavor of giving you a VMware-based solution assessment. In the past, the assessments were focused on cloud native solution. So they would give you an assessment based off of the cost of a Azure VMware, actually, they didn't even give you containers. It was all kind of IaaS VMs. Now they have provided the AVS Express solution assessment, which is a second solution that you can, assessment that you can use, where you're able to do almost close to apples comparison of, here's my current VMware environment, here's what it would cost to run this same VMware environment on Azure. It gives you kind of that total cost of ownership estimate. It'll give you a snapshot of your current infrastructure, what can be right-sized, what can be moved to, or what's not movable because it's end of life, or where is there storage usage that can be optimized. And then there is also a sustainability and environmental impact. If that is a factor that your organization looks at when making decisions, then it gives you the opportunity to look at what those carbon footprint goals are and how to reduce those costs or increase those efficiencies. And so from an AVS Express analysis perspective, this is probably the lightest weight assessment that is provided by Azure. It is a quick kickoff call. We'll ask you to run what they're using is RV tools. It will pull out an extract, an Excel CSV extract of your vSphere environments. We will then take that, send it over to Microsoft. They will upload it. They are saying it's about a 1 day, 24-hour turnaround. I'll say it's 24 to 72 hours. Let's just give them a business day to get it back to us. And then it will load the results of the assessment. This is a very high level, kind of meant to be a directional business case for us to say, is there even a benefit that's going to be incurred? You as a client might come and say, hey, listen, if this is more than $4 million, don't even talk to me about this. Or, hey, is there a way to have this fit within a certain range? Okay, cool. We'll work with you on that. And then the next steps are usually one of the more engaging solution assessments, where we're going in 4 to 6 weeks, actually looking at sequencing, app migrations, etc. So sample insights report coming out of AVS Express, you'll notice that it's very similar to, if anybody has used Dr. Migrate, that is what Microsoft is using today, but they've got that they'll pay for the license for a certain period of time for you as a customer. And then there's an opportunity if you'd like to extend that data for your team, you can pick up that license at a certain cost after, I want to say it's 90 days. So you see kind of executive summary on the top left, bottom right shows infrastructure count, servers, storage, etc. The top right is your carbon footprint report. So today, Microsoft provide, and this is a screen grab of an internal Microsoft to partner session that we had. Today, Microsoft offers these 4 assessment types within Azure. There's a security-based assessment that's outside of this. For this, we generally talk about the secure migration. That's that 4 to 6 week Azure migrate, Doctor migrate assessment. We provide you with almost a full-blown, here's our expectation for your Azure cost and your timeline for a migration. The next one is 6 stars, where we actually talk about, are there opportunities to modernize? Are we migrating certain applications, modernizing certain applications, decommissioning, etc. So there's a lot of that goes into this, and that's generally an 8-week plus type pre-planning, pre-design prior to a migration. The new one that I just mentioned is the AVS Express, where you are providing an RV Tools extract. And so here, even here, they have the average execution time more realistic to about 3 to 5 days. Probably 1 day to actually submit it to the analysis tool and get back your response. And then beyond so those top 3 are the Azure migration assessments that are available to you as a customer. The last one is more modernization of applications. And so are there opportunities for us to identify vulnerabilities or areas of concern for an application that might make it a good candidate for modernization? And so that kind of brings us into a different field of where do we optimize so that we can make your application foolproof for the future. Quick summary. Highly advise that you request this PowerPoint so that we can, so you don't have to try to remember this on your own. The main takeaway here, because this is such a new product, Microsoft has an AVS-based migration assessment that is separate than anything Azure native. And so if you today said, I'm curious what it would cost me to do VMware to AVS, but I also want to know what it would cost if we did VMware to Azure native, it would more likely than not be 2 separate assessments that would have to be done simultaneously. In the future, I'm sure Microsoft's working on combining these, but this is more of a speed to market type situation. More likely than not be 2 separate assessments that would have to be done simultaneously. In the future, I'm sure Microsoft's working on combining these, but this is more of a speed to market type situation. Kind of mentioned this, some of the Azure services that are integrated with AVS once you move into Azure for VMware. So you're able to lock in on API management, which is a big one of our clients. You're able to tap into all of the data services, both in a IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS-based solution. Fabric has been growing tremendously in the last couple months with Microsoft, being able to integrate so much of our data. I feel like I'm using the word estate too much, but the data footprint is expanding at an exponential pace. And so more than ever, we are seeing a situation where we need to understand how do we make the garbage in, garbage out, right? So how do we make the best use of the data that we have available to us as an organization? Because if we're just storing this and paying for it, we're not doing anything with it, then it begs the question of why are we even carrying it, right? run through this real quick. I kind of alluded to this earlier on. Hastings Direct was actually a Microsoft partner. We were not able to share our specific partner examples because of branding situation. So I can speak on kind of a few that we've done, but Hastings has had a situation where they had a tech debt issue. They needed to understand how they're going to be able to modernize and expand their application for performance reasons. And by taking advantage of Azure cloud services for monitoring and some other kind of load balancing type pieces, they are able to maximize application growth and throughput without having to completely purchase new hardware on-prem. And it jump-started their ability to move into Azure cloud by first maintaining their VMware skill sets, staying on AVS for the first couple of years, and then transitioning slowly into additional other Azure portfolio of items. And so this is kind of that tried and true method of we owe it to our team to not move too fast in this space. So if they're not ready for Azure, how do we help them get there incrementally? And I think I'm gonna do 2 more slides because I realize that I'm coming up on time. This is a quick summary of kind of the places where we can take VMware solutions, right? We can either take them straight to AVS and we gain the benefits of the left-hand side, retaining our VMware skill set, migrating quickly out of a data center. On the right-hand side, we are able to move to Azure native solutions, whether it's IaaS or PaaS. We're able to start modernizing different applications, different pieces. We're able to take advantage of the